Hello and welcome to HR Talk, People Management's regular discussion about the topics making the news in the HR world. I'm Claire Churchard and this week I'm joined by Alastair Hatchett, Head of Pay and HR Services at Income Data Services, and we'll be discussing pay trends. Employers and staff have faced tough economic conditions over the past few years, forcing them into difficult decisions around rewarding talent while maintaining profitability. During the recession, which ended in late 2009, we saw widespread wage freezes, but since then we've seen inflation rise and some movement on pay, with average increases in the private sector between 2.5% and 3% this year. Okay, so Alastair, how do you see the situation developing for pay in the public and private sector?
In the private sector, we've seen a median increase last year of 2% and a median increase of 2.5% this year, so just nudging between 2.5% and 3%. If you go back to the worst year of the recession, 2009, we did see a lot of pay freezes, but in reality, on our estimation in IDS Pay, we found about a third of companies had freezes that year. Subsequently, in 2010, that dropped back towards 20%. Perhaps only 7% in our calculations had double-year pay freezes. During the recession itself, there were still some legacy pay increases in the public sector from previous long-term agreements. Those ended. Under the current policy, we've got a 2-year pay freeze in the public sector running through 2010, 2011, 2012. It's phased differently in different parts of the public sector, but essentially it's frozen at the moment, but increases in the private sector are of the order of 2.5–3%.
Okay. And I mean, obviously, we've seen some long-term pay deals, like the 5-year tube deal, which was linked to inflation, which was agreed in the summer. Do you think we're going to see more deals like this, or is there too much economic uncertainty?
What we saw with long-term pay agreements was a sharp decline in that type of agreement in 2009. And indeed in 2010, but in the last year or so they've been coming back and there's more confidence. It's still a bit limited, but it's growing again, and I think it's interesting that most of them are linked to the RPI, with either a straight RPI link or an RPI plus a half link, and they're coming back in industries that probably had pay freezes, so there's a certain amount of willingness to give 5% if in the previous period there'd been a pay freeze, and there's a sort of give back idea behind it.
And obviously, with speculation about a looming double-dip recession, what other pay trends do you sort of expect to see in 2012? For example, do you think we'll see a return to larger city bonuses?
Bonus payments, for example, have been pretty steady through the recession. The city had a much lower bonus payment in 2009, but it's been edging back. I had expected variable pay bonuses across all industries to shrink and be the kind of cushion from the economic uncertainty. But actually the ONS figures suggest that bonus payments have held up remarkably well, both across the finance sector and all other sectors. And you'll see that in the form of profit sharing at Waitrose through to other sectors where profit sharing has been quite strong. There's a caveat to that, which is that a number of companies, rather than give pay rises, have given one-off lump sums. And the Office for National Statistics measures that as a bonus, whereas in reality it's in lieu of a pay rise. So maybe there's been an exaggeration of variable pay, while some people actually have been having a freeze simultaneously with a bonus.
Sure. And we were talking earlier, and you mentioned anomalies and perhaps how the recession creates anomalies in pay, and it's difficult to sort of level up or down, and the effect that this might have on basic pay. Can you just sort of tell me a bit more about that, the impact of that?
Recessions involve staff recruitment freezes, a lack of ability to promote people, disjunction from market rate setting, a pay freeze for 1 year, or a bonus freeze in 1 year, so that people lose track of quite what their package might be. And companies find that when they come out of recession, they're having to say, well, where are we in relation to the market? How do we fix this? How do we, if the recruitment freeze ends, how quickly do we let the tap open up? So if we say next year we're expecting pay rises of 2.5% to 3%, maybe we should also be looking at what companies will have as budgets, because part of that budget will be for sorting out anomalous developments within their organisations. Maybe you've had fewer people doing a multitude of tasks. You want to promote a number of these people. So you've got to have an extra budget for promotions within the overall 3% or more budget, which includes salary increase and bonus.
So it would push down the basic increase potentially?
Yes, you could see the overall increase being 2.5%, simultaneously with extra money for promotions and recruitment and sorting out anomalies.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you about unions' bargaining positions. I mean, there are so many unemployed people at the moment. Are the unions in a strong or a weak position to kind of bang the drum on pay?
I think the general picture is that we've got a weak labour market, and it's very difficult for the unions to get increases beyond those that they have achieved. You will find that the sectors with the highest increases in the last year are probably unionised, and therefore there's been a push there. I think, given that inflation's remained high through this period, and most people have had quite low pay increases, there's a bit of a head of steam developing over the kind of catch-up or retaining a bit more of disposable income, given that people have lost up to 10% disposable income. And unions can give voice to that, and have been. We've seen it in a number of disputes during this year that unions have said we would like to at least match the rate of inflation. I think the image in my mind is of a lot of people trying to reach for the level of inflation, currently around 5%, but not quite getting there. And that's down to company affordability and general performance of companies, rather than union weakness. It's more, in many cases, it's more to do with negotiating a compromise around the 3% level, say.
So, Alastair, what are the inflation projections next year? Because I know you've done some research on that as well in your recent report.
Yes, we do a quarterly ring around the city, really, to economists to see what they think the inflation rate is going to be in the forthcoming 12 months or so. They're suggesting we start next year with a rate of inflation as measured by the RPI around about 4.5%. And through the course of next year, that will drop away towards 3.2, 3.5% perhaps. It may be that the impact of a slower economy means that inflation rate goes down a little bit faster. But you see, you've got all these increases from the utilities coming through, which are pushing inflation up. You will get a slight decrease in January because VAT, the increase in VAT last January drops out of the annual measure. But you're going to have slightly less inflation than we've had this year, and on a downward trend.
Fantastic. Alastair, thanks very much. That's all for this week, but you can keep up to date with the latest HR news on our website, www.peoplemanagement.co.uk. And until the next time, take care.